You are listening to Radio Maria Canada. We now present the Health Hub, hosted by Kathy Biasi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Health Hub. I'm Kathy Biasi, your host, and along with our producer, Alex Diaz, we would like to welcome you to our show this morning. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Kathy.
All good over there?
Yes, all is well.
Excellent, excellent. Today's show is taped, so unfortunately no opportunity for call-in, but we would love you to follow us on our social sites. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we are at the Health Hub RMC. And if you have any questions for us or any show topics that you're interested in, please do email us at thh@radiomaria.ca. And this show, along with all of our other shows, live, taped, they're all turned into podcasts, and they are on iTunes, SoundCloud, all your favorite podcast platforms, and you just search out the Health Hub. You can also find our podcasts on the Radio Maria Canada website, which is radiomaria.ca, and you can find them on my website, which is kathybiasi.com. So today I wanted to broach the subject of electrolytes and just give you a brief explanation of what they are, some issues where you may find that you're having symptoms of electrolyte deficiency, and just sort of give you an overview of this topic. Electrolytes are substances that conduct electricity when they're dissolved in water. They're essential for us, for living. They impact so many bodily functions. Electrolytes are involved in the transmission of electrical impulses for proper functioning of the heart, of nerves, and of muscles. So absolutely important for our existence. We have a number of electrolytes in our body: sodium, potassium, calcium, bicarbonate, magnesium, chloride, and phosphate. And when we have an imbalance of electrolytes, many symptoms can be experienced, but common ones are twitching, weakness, and in severe cases, heart rhythm disturbances. Those are the main ones. There are a whole bunch of them, but those are ones that are quite common. When you have a magnesium deficiency, a lot of people are very familiar with leg cramping, and one of the first go-tos is to replenish with magnesium. But a lot of symptoms can come up when you have an imbalance of electrolytes. And older adults are particularly at risk of electrolyte imbalance. When we have these symptoms, it can be from many different things, but common causes of electrolyte imbalances arise from losing fluid in our body. So fluid loss can come from extensive and intensive physical activity where there's a lot of sweating, even overuse of saunas. If you get sick, if you've got vomiting or diarrhea, this can lead to an excessive loss of fluids, which can throw your balance off of electrolytes. Poor diets that are low in essential nutrients, and malabsorption of essential nutrients. So you can be eating the right foods, but they're not being absorbed. That's what that situation is pointing to. And medications and diuretics, antibiotics, and chemotherapy drugs can also be a cause of electrolyte imbalances. So the question arises: is how do we replenish electrolytes when they are deficient or out of balance? So I just wanted to give you a few simple remedies when you have a perceived electrolyte imbalance, so that you can correct it at home. Sea salt. So sodium is one of the electrolytes that we lose very quickly through sweating. And ingesting a little bit of sea salt or Himalayan salt can really help to replenish not only the sodium, but other important electrolytes like magnesium, calcium, chloride, and potassium. So hydration is important. It's very important. What you can do in this instance is make a solution. It's called Soleil, and you basically put rocks of Himalayan salt in a mason jar, fill it up with water, and let it saturate. And then you take a teaspoon of this Soleil and put it into a cup of regular water and drink that. Now, it is quite salty, even though you're only putting a teaspoon in, but this really does help with hydration and your electrolyte balancing. Also, coconut water. Coconut water is packed with nutrients and it is low in sugar. So it's a really quick and great way to replenish electrolytes, especially potassium. So as you see, when I'm going to be giving you a quick little recipe at home, it's combinations of all these things that will really help give you a well-rounded at-home remedy for electrolyte imbalances. And of course, getting your electrolytes and getting the essential minerals from your foods is important. So eating a very good diet, leafy green veggies, lots of fruits are great. Now, in the sports world, and you see it on TV a lot of the sports drinks are where people go to replenish their electrolytes or when they're sweating. But store-bought sport drinks can be very high in sugar and some can contain artificial flavors. So you can easily put together a homemade electrolyte balancing recipe with just some of the ingredients that I gave you, the salt and the coconut water, adding some fruits to it, and just making a nice little drink for yourself at home. So here's one quick recipe. You can take 500 milliliters of cold water or coconut water. Coconut water adds a nice little flavor to it.
I love coconut water.
You love coconut water? So do I.
Yeah.
It's very refreshing, especially when it's really chilled. I love it. It's great. So adding coconut water, and then you can put in 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, and then a half a teaspoon of Himalayan salt, a quarter cup of lemon juice, and a quarter cup of lime juice. Of course, you can adjust the taste if that's a little bit too bitter for you or a little bit too sweet for you. But those are, how many are they? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients that you can throw together and make a very quick and refreshing electrolyte balancing drink.
Very good.
Very good. Yes. So you can also, if you really want to get fancy, you can throw it into a blender and add some ice and make sort of like a slushy idea. But use that. And again, the salt recipe that I gave you, the sea salt in the water, that's good to have frequently, just to help balance things out, keep your hydration up there. So again, keep your electrolytes in balance. Know the signs of an electrolyte imbalance, and take care of yourself. So on to today's show. We have a documentary from the CBC. It's called Be Afraid, The Science of Fear with Roberto Verdecchia. Very interesting documentary. I watched it myself, so I know firsthand how interesting it is and very informative. And almost everyone has at least a fear, and sometimes it's irrational and sometimes it's crippling. But what exactly is a fear? What triggers our fear threshold? Why are we repelled by some things and not by others? And in this documentary, Roberto answers many of these questions. It's very entertaining and it's very informative. Roberto Verdecchia is an award-winning documentary director, writer, and producer. For more than 25 years, he has worked on an incredibly wide range of documentaries, all the way from indigenous rights in the Amazon, the wild insect life inside your home, high-speed particle physics, and mountain gorillas, to the mystery of what killed Edgar Allan Poe, where he actually starred as Poe himself. Aside from making movies, Roberto also has developed numerous social and environmental projects, from neighborhood newspapers in Toronto to nonviolence training in Sierra Leone. Currently, he lives in Toronto with his partner, daughter, and his dog. So we're going to talk to him about the filming of his documentary. We're going to learn, is fear innate or is it learned? Is fear a necessary emotion? Can we overcome our fears, and many other things that he learned and has shared with us in his new documentary, Be Afraid, The Science of Fear. We'll be right back.
You are listening to Radio Maria Canada. We now continue with the program, The Health Hub, hosted by Kathy Biasi.
Welcome back, everybody. Our show today is taped. Please do follow us on our social sites. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we are at the Health Hub RMC. Roberto, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's an interesting documentary. I've watched it, and I really do encourage everyone else to watch it. It's fascinating. It's fun. But whatever got you onto this topic of fear?
It was kind of from the results of my last show for Nature of Things, previous show, was all about the wildlife that lives in your home. Sort of, creepy crawly insects, spiders, all those kinds of things that we all live with. Doesn't matter how clean your house is, everybody has them. So we were filming all these different kinds of bugs and stuff, and I used to be quite freaked out by house centipedes. Not phobic, but I certainly didn't like them, and I was very, freaked out by them. And in filming them and in looking at them more and studying them and researching them, getting to know them, I really overcame all that kind of jitters that I had about them. And then I also saw other people in the show, react really strongly to spiders, whereas I don't have a problem at all with spiders. Anyway, it was all that kind of thing, like how differing people's reactions were to apparently fear-inducing objects. It just got me thinking about what's going on with fear. What do we know about fear? How to overcome our fears? So I started researching that theme, and it led me to that show. How
much back time did you have to go through before you actually started physically doing the documentary?
How much research time, background time?
Yeah, background time before you were able to actually hone in on your topics and your people.
Oh, I don't know. I can't remember. Maybe 3 months, 4 months. I mean, part of it is it's the nature of the proposal business, the pitching business. So you have to pitch something to CBC, and it takes them a while to look at your pitch, and then they get back to us and said, we're interested, but maybe we don't like this story. Maybe that story is more interesting, so it takes a bit longer. But, maybe it was 4 or 5 months from sort of initial pitch to, okay, let's go. We could do this.
It's very interesting, especially the people that you talked about. And I want to take people sort of segment by segment through it so they get a good sense of what they'll be in for when they're watching it. But what did you learn? What's most surprised you when you were doing this research about fear?
I think, the main thing I take away from the experience is, I guess I started with this kind of naive point of view about fear, that, fear is bad. Fear is bad. You want to avoid it. It's a bad thing. The less you have of it, the better. That kind of fear is our enemy, that kind of thing. And I really gained an appreciation for fear and how amazing it works, how amazingly fine-tuned our threat detection systems are. And I began to learn, that fear is actually on your side. If it becomes debilitating, then sure, it's not. It becomes a hindrance, obviously, if you're afraid of too many things in the world so you can have a decent life. But generally, I began to notice that fear is there to keep me safe, and that's why all creatures have some kind of, whether it's an emotion we'll call fear or some kind of threat response or a threat detection system and response. Without fear, we wouldn't be here. Just plain and simple. It's what keeps us alive. So I start to see it as more my friend, and I can, when I feel it, I can check. Is it, is this totally irrational, or can I lean into this a little bit and cozy up a bit more to my fear, expand my sense of resilience?
Well, is fear an emotion that is evoked? How do I say this properly? Why is it necessary? Is it a protection mechanism? It is a safety mechanism?
Yeah, I think it's a safety mechanism. I mean, it's really, it works at the level of, you're walking down the street and something just looks a little bit weird up ahead at night. Maybe you can't see very clearly. Maybe you see a figure run across your field of vision. You're not immediately terrified, of course, but something goes on in your brain. You go, what was that? And your senses tune in. You become super alert to what that was, and you figure out, it's just it was a guy walking down the street, no big deal. But if you see suddenly one guy running and then 3 guys chasing that person and then 5 more people running after that person, and then you start to wonder, should I also start running? Because maybe there's something dangerous. So it's there to keep us safe. That's the response, I'm sure.
Well, I'm not going sequentially in the documentary, but to this point, you did a segment about a baby and testing, if that's the right word, a baby with different pictures and things. And what did you find there?
Yeah, that was a whole section, we were looking at the question of whether there are innate fears, like are human beings born to fear certain things, or born already sort of fearing certain things. And the main thing we were looking at was snakes and spiders, because like across the board, those are the top kind of creatures that the more people are afraid of, and disproportionately so. Even, there are countries that don't have any poisonous snakes or spiders. Even in Canada, there are very few snakes and spiders that could really hurt you. But people's fear is sort of through the roof, and it doesn't make any sense, really. So we began to think, well, maybe there's an evolutionary reason. Maybe it's hardwired into us. We're born with these fears. So there's a doctor in Pittsburgh who's at Carnegie Mellon who's studying that to see what it is, what we're born with or not. And he's come to the conclusion that there really are no innate fears. But what he does is he looks around 5 months of age. He takes babies about 5 months, 6 months, and he shows them pictures of snakes and spiders, but also flowers and rodents, sharks, things like that. And he tracks their attention. And he's found that around 5 months of age, babies will track images of snakes and spiders longer than they'll track any other image. So it draws their attention. So it doesn't mean that they're afraid of these things, but it means that it seems like we are born with a kind of, innate threat detection system for certain kinds of things, like snakes and spiders, and that could be an evolutionary could have resulted from evolution. But the fact is that you still have to learn those fears. So when you're an infant and you see a snake and you go to reach out for a snake, if nobody around you says, oh, no, that's, if nobody responds negatively, you'll reach out for that snake, you'll grab it, you'll hold it, you'll pet it, you'll do whatever you want with it, and you'll grow up to, you won't fear snakes if nobody ever gives you a sign that you shouldn't. And same with spiders. But the fact is, people tend to give babies those signs, with good reason. You could get bitten, I suppose, but they're really, in a sense, not much more scary than many other things. So that was what that whole, I hope that answered the question.
No, it did, absolutely. But actually, that segment brought up something interesting in that is our fear mechanism being sort of pushed out of us as we evolve? Because I think there was a segment or a little piece talking about, we're not forced to be in life-threatening situations most of the time like we were before. And so is that emotion, is that instinctual fear, is it being bred out of us as time goes by, or are they being replaced by different types of fears?
Yeah, it was a theme we just touched on a little bit in the film, because it's really just sort of speculation. These people experts in the field who are studying fear, and people, even one researcher who's studying a woman who has no fear, she lacks the fear center in her brain, so she doesn't feel fear, which is an incredible story. So these people are speculating a little bit, and there's not sort of evidence we can point to say we are less fearful now, or it's evolving in that direction away from fear. But a number of people did point out this thing of like that response of that kind of incredibly fast and in a way stressful response, right? The body ramps up, gets ready to run or to fight, or your whole body's ready to go. It may not be the healthiest thing in this world anymore, and what's happening is, one person was talking about how we're triggered by the news. For example, you can read the news on your cell phone any time of the day, 24 hours, 24/7. We're getting this kind of bombarding of news images, which, when you see a bomb go off on the news, part of your brain sort of responds as if it's under threat, and it's becomes stressful. But there's nothing you can do. So it's a very different world than a world where other people had said in the film, you're being hunted, by lions and tigers, or you really do have to fear every single day to make sure you're not going to get killed, or you're going to find enough food. We have a lot of our basic needs taken care of. So some people were saying, the kind of extreme sort of stress disorders that we're seeing, a lot of people have these anxiety disorders, may be a result of having this kind of incredible threat detection system that's kind of working overtime, and it doesn't really need to be. And so maybe they were also speculating that maybe in the future it'll tampen down a little bit.
Yeah, they're in that response and comparing those two, it's almost like there's no resolution of fear now. Whereas you're faced with a bear, you get away from the bear, the fear is done, and then we're like in this heightened sense all the time.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's an interesting concept. Very interesting.
Yeah,
concept.
I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was very interesting. We couldn't go into it super in depth in the film because there wasn't. But like I said, it's just sort of speculation. But it's very, very interesting to think about for sure.
Well, in speaking about this woman who had no fear, give us the background of what you learned about how the brain processes fear and why this woman wasn't experiencing fear.
Yeah, this is an extreme case and a famous case in the neurological research. So there's typically in people's brains, there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, and it's known as kind of the fear center. It's the threat detection center, and it's described as kind of, you're in the world, and it's kind of scanning, all your senses are scanning your environment at all times, and if anything's kind of weird or out of place or strange, your amygdala fires up and goes, or sort of like a radar, it says, what's that? Beep, 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 beep. Pay attention to that, and you'll decide if that's threatening or not. And if it's threatening, then there's a whole fear response that's perhaps launched with adrenaline and so on, where your senses focus in on what kind of information you need to glean from the environment, and you decide if you need to run or fight or, that fight or flight response. But it's all kind of based on the amygdala as that gatekeeper. And so this woman in the U.S., is all we really know about her. She has this extremely rare genetic condition where, as a result of this condition, her amygdala is basically gone. It's been calcified away, and it's been she doesn't have an amygdala. And so, as a result of that, she's unable to feel fear. And so this Dr. Feinstein in the film, we talked to him, he's been working with her for about over a decade now, almost 2 decades, to try to understand better how it is she lives in the world, how she experiences emotions, what it means to live without an amygdala. And he spent, lots of time trying to scare her in different ways, showing her scary movies and taking her to scary haunted attractions and all that kind of stuff. And she doesn't show any response at all because of that condition, that lack of amygdala. And yet she's able to cry. She watches sad movies, she feels sad, she feels happy, she feels compassion. In all other respects, she's perfectly normal.
The interesting part about that, there was the part of her story that you documented was that she had a gun put to her head and really didn't think much of it. Now, even if you don't feel that fear response, wouldn't you intuitively know that that's not a good situation to be in? Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I had to ask him a number of times, how does it really work? Wouldn't you? And he Dr. Feinstein explained it as, so that she understands logically what the issue is, and she understands the laws of physics. He would say, so she knows she has to be careful when she's crossing the road. If she gets hit by a car, she could be injured. But it's all at a logical level. And it's not at a fearful emotional level. So it's almost like a recipe, like that or a guidebook that she would have to read, or an instruction manual that she would have to read to learn about what's safe and what's not. So you and I are walking down in a park late at night, and we decide to cut through this dark park because we're trying to get home faster, even though we know it's probably not a good thing. And then we see some weird-looking people up ahead, and they're shouting, and they're acting a bit weird, and they call us, and they tell us to come over to them. Immediately your hairs go up, and your back gets up, and you start to think, I better turn around and run, or there's a feeling inside you right away, this is threatening, this could be dangerous. She doesn't have that, so she wouldn't know. She would have to explain to her, if you're in a park late at night and there are people who look weird to you, and you might have to explain what that means to look weird, and they are acting in a strange way, and they call you over to them, and they have knives, don't go over. So same with when she has a gun pointed to her head. I think she understood that the gun was dangerous, that people can get killed by guns, but she didn't understand she didn't have that kind of emotional reaction that these are dangerous people, that this is a threatening thing,
that I better not say those things about my neighbors anymore, because this is what happens when I threaten, or when I say bad things about my drug dealing neighbors, which was what the story was about. She just didn't think it was a big deal, and so when the cops came to interview her, because the neighbor had called it in, she just kind of said, nothing happened. It's just I had a gun pointed to me at my head, but they didn't shoot me. So what's the problem? Yeah. It was that kind of at a logical level. It makes.
Yeah, it was very bizarre. It was a very bizarre segment.
Totally bizarre.
Because I'm watching it, I'm going, okay, she might not have fear of this, but why wouldn't she just know that she could get hurt? I guess, and that's the reason, coming back to where we started, that this emotion is important to us and that it is ingrained in us. It comes back to playing out and getting a whole picture of each scenario that you're in during the day.
Yeah.
Very fascinating.
Yeah, that park example that I gave is, in fact, another story that we don't mention, but it happened to her also, that she did go through this park late at night, and she was threatened with a knife. And she knew she didn't say she was afraid, but she knew this person could hurt her. But she didn't respond in the fearful, screaming, let me go, kind of wide-eyed look about her. And then the guy who was threatening her, the assailant, actually thought it was so strange that he got freaked out.
Exactly.
And
I
he
was
left.
just thinking that would that would be a natural response as well. Did she have this condition all of her life, or was this developed?
As of around age 10 or 11 is when the amygdala sort of shut down completely. So I think she has some early memories. She talked about being scared of snakes, I think. When she was a little kid, she said she was really afraid of a snake or something that a friend of hers had or that she'd seen. But then, again, they took her to an exotic pet store to see if they could get her to be afraid of snakes. And Dr. Feinstein said she was, even though she said she was afraid of snakes, she showed no fear whatsoever. She actually was reaching into the tank to get the snakes, and the pet store people said had to hold her back a little bit, say, well, careful, this one you got to handle carefully. And
that learned response was wiped out.
Yeah.
Interesting. We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll come back to continue talking about this great documentary. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking to Roberto Verdecchia, and he is the creator of the new documentary on the CBC, Be Afraid, The Science of Fear. Roberto, we talked about some very interesting. We've actually gone backwards and worked our way up towards the other aspects. So when people watch the film, they're going to be seeing what we're talking about now is irrational fears. They'll be seeing this piece first. And again, when we're talking about fears, we assume that, or what you've learned and what you've spoken about is that fears are learned. But somebody who has an irrational fear, that's not necessarily true, is it?
Yeah, no, it kind of works at a different level, the phobias, and I'm not exactly sure, how it is that someone develops a phobia. I mean, certainly the biographical element, but why something would go to such an incredible length, so it's one thing to sort of say, I had a problem, a snake bit my ankle when I was a kid, so I'm careful with snakes, but another thing is to not even be able to look at a picture in a book of a snake, with some people who have phobias of snakes, it's at that level, which is irrational for sure.
Well, the woman who is afraid of the chicken,
yeah.
I don't recall her saying she was pecked by a chicken or something like that. She just was freaked out by this chicken, or all chickens.
Yeah, and it was interesting because the doctor who is working with her in this incredible treatment that she's sort of developed, she said it doesn't even really matter if you know when you first developed that phobia or what its roots might be. So she could, for example, you could analyze that phobia. She could say, when I was a kid, I was pecked by 5 or 10 chickens and it freaked me out and nobody was around to help me. And so that's why, even knowing that, even if you know that, and even if that is really what happened, it doesn't matter. That phobia can't be controlled or dealt with at a rational level. So because it just overrides it completely overrides your rational brain, right? It's too late. So you have to address it in terms of curing that phobia. You have to address it somewhere else, in some other way. Now, so it doesn't work at that logical level.
In her case, is her amygdala firing irrationally? Is it lighting up far more than everybody else's? Is this an actual physiological thing that can be controlled?
It's like that. It's for some reason, something in her brain says that a chicken is a dangerous thing, and her amygdala says, watch out, run, whatever you need to do, protect yourself. The Dr. Kint described it as the same kind of response that you or I would get if suddenly there was a tiger, in the room that appeared, but right? Some incredible predatory beast was in your house with you, and you freaked out completely with good reason, because you thought I could be killed at any moment. For them, it was the same. It's that kind of irrational response.
And the therapy that it's interesting because we've had some guests on the show. One in particular, we're talking about PTSD and how talking about and reliving these events may not be helpful and may be actually detrimental. And this almost, to me, goes down that same line. There's no point hashing out where the phobia came. Let's deal with it. So she's not doing psychology. She's not doing that type of talk therapy. What is she doing to help these people?
Yeah, she's a psychologist at the University of Amsterdam, and her treatment's based on this new kind of understanding that's developed about how memories work. That's actually a Canadian researcher, or a guy who was working at McGill at the time. Now he's in New York somewhere, Karim Nader, who in the year 2000, I think it was, published a paper about how fear memories, or memories in general, it's understood that they're not like a photograph. It's not like an archive that you have in your filing system, and when you see something in the world, you have this memory that comes up and tells you what that is, and it's a dog, and the dogs are okay, and don't worry about it. But what happens is that memories are subject to a thing called reconsolidation. So they're dynamic, and they're kind of unstable, and they are called up in your brain, let's say, and then they get resaved. And maybe they get resaved with new information, right? That's why you're able to learn. In fact, it makes sense what this research is pointing out. But this woman, Dr. Kint in Amsterdam, read about this research, learned about how memories are working, and they're subject to this resaving process, usually apparently during sleep, it seems, and discovered that there's a drug that's propranolol, that's a kind of a heart medication that's been used for decades now already. And what that drug happens to do is it happens to block those memories from being resaved. It's just a kind of a chemical process where the protein synthesis that has to happen to resave that memory, it gets stopped. And so she developed this treatment where somebody who's phobic of, in this case in the film we have this woman who's afraid of chickens, deeply afraid of chickens. She's exposed to this chicken, so this fear memory comes up in her brain. At a certain point where it seems like the memory is there, it's fresh in her mind, it's open, it's a bit, intuitive on the part of the doctor. They stop the exposure. She's given this pill of propranolol. She takes it. She has a good sleep at that night, and she comes back the next day and she's cured. The memory, that fear memory, the memory that says, oh my God, there's a chicken, you better start to run, your heartbeat better start to pound, you better start to get ready to, it's wiped out. And so what happens is there's this strange kind of disconnect. The person thinks in their cognitive brain, I'm afraid of chickens, but they see this chicken and they don't have the fear response.
It's fascinating.
They're left with this. Yeah, it's incredible.
It is incredible.
One of the most amazing things
how
I've ever
heart
filmed.
medication can, how she's reworked the dynamics of what this heart medication is doing. Is it a neurotransmitter thing that she's affecting?
Yeah, that's what it is. It's a certain neurotransmitter that normally goes into saving memories. It's stopped, and its functioning is blocked, and so those memories just don't get resaved. And in a way, you forget that you're supposed to be afraid of this thing, this chicken, or heights, or claustrophobia, or spiders. Or she's cured a huge amount of people. It's incredible, with like 85-90% success rate. And no relapse is the other issue. And
is it a one-time or two-time, or is it one treatment and done, or are these people on this medication forever?
No, it's one pill and you're done. If it works, then it works.
So you're basically wiping out a bad memory.
Yeah.
But there's another aspect of the film. A gentleman his fear is heights, and you're using, but therapists are using virtual reality to try and cure that. Now, to me, that would freak me out. But it's working, this therapy, and I found that extremely interesting too.
Yeah, it's a guy in University of Quebec in Gatineau who has this incredible VR lab, a super immersive kind of 3D cube system, and it's especially good for things like heights. Or they explained to me, the idea is that with a therapist, you can, if you're going to try to cure your fear of heights, you have to, in traditional therapy, you have to go and expose yourself to heights, or approach a ledge over and over again, maybe 20, 30, 40 times. Every time you do it, you get a bit closer to the ledge, a bit closer to the ledge, a bit closer to the ledge. And it's very, very difficult on people. And many people stop doing exposure therapy because it's so taxing, right? It's so difficult to do over and over. But in virtual reality, you can do that thing. You have to do it over and over also. But you can actually not just approach the ledge, but you could jump. Right, you could jump over the cliff. If you really want to conquer your fear of heights, you could jump over this cliff or jump into this big hole. And of course, you're not going to get hurt if anything goes wrong because it's all virtual. But the fears and the responses and any kind of curing that happens is all real, also, or in any case. And so in the film, that's what we see was this guy afraid of heights, and he does only one session, and he already shows a marked advance.
Two very different ways of approaching these phobias, for sure. Very. It's an interesting thing to watch. My stomach got a little bit when I was watching this. I envisioned the virtual reality goggles on, and he's approaching this thing, and to me, I'm like, oh, that would be, if I was afraid of that. That would, being in 3D and seeing it in front of me, that would be heart wrenching, I think. But
it's funny because we were filming, and we don't see, we see a little bit what he can see. It's projected onto the walls, but it's much less of a good illusion for us, right? Because we don't have the fully immersive goggles on, and so we're filming. So it's quite funny because at one point he's very afraid of jumping into the hole, but really it's just a picture on the floor, right? So when he jumps, he's hopping. He's hopping on the floor. So from the outside, it's quite ridiculous.
I know, but
but inside, he's totally gripped.
I don't know if you ever actually had those 3D goggles. It's very real. It's very, very real.
No, for sure.
So
and even without the goggles, I mean, you still feel that tension. You still feel that because you're locked in, right? You're watching him be afraid, and you're super connected at the same time. You're hoping
remarkable. He goes up another rung of the ladder. Yeah, you're invested. You're much more invested when you're seeing someone like that as opposed to taking a pill. Two very different aspects and ways of training out fears. Now, some people though love the fear. And this is very different from not having fear at all versus getting a real rush from fear.
Yeah.
And this is interesting to me too. Just in my own family dynamic, I've got nieces and nephews who from a very young age love scary movies, and my kids still like to watch Bambi and get upset when the mother is shot at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah,
Two very, very different types of kids. What is it that you found propels these people? The man that you did on that you filmed on the show was a motorcycle stuntman, like an Evel Knievel type of person.
Right.
What did you find that drove him? He had fear.
Yeah. He has fear, and the interesting thing about him is that he does feel fear, and he describes, being white-knuckled on his bike when he's trying a new stunt that he feels is dangerous, or having failed and having to do it again. He's breathing very deeply, so it's clear he's connected. He's doesn't have an aberration in his brain, but he has this remarkable ability to feel all that like you and I would, and then just turn it aside, just sort of turn it away or shut it down and focus in on what he needs to do, which is, okay, I got to get it together. I got to ride my bike at a certain speed. I got to pull it up at this degree. I got to launch my body this way. Just zoom in onto that and sort of bypass that fearful emotion, which for most people would just turn them off completely. They'd say, forget it, I'm not going to do this. And at the same time, the research that Dr. Zold, who's in the film, who studies this motor stunt motocross stuntman. Apparently, it looks like in his brain, after he overcomes his fears and does these stunts, he gets an extra boost, a kind of extra reward in his brain, more than you and I would probably get. So it's more of a flood of dopamine, apparently. And that seems to be typical of thrill seekers, is that they have this extra boost of reward. So there's sort of two aspects. One is this desire to go towards fear and be able to deal with it, and the second is getting an extra jolt or an extra reward once they've done it.
It's funny, I was watching the film, and all I could think of is we have a dog next door in our place up north, and they've got the invisible fence. And they've got two dogs, and the one dog, they put that collar on so that they get a little zap if they go towards the fence. The one dog doesn't go near the fence, but the other little guy will just take that hit to break through the line. And, he knows he's going to be lined up for a shock, but what's waiting on the other side is just so great for him. And I just kept thinking of that analogy. Roberto?
Yep.
Oh, are you there? Okay, sorry. I thought we lost you.
Sorry, yeah, I thought you cut out for a second.
Oh, we might have.
No, it's a good example. Yeah. I think it is, and like different dog breeds, I mean, there's just genetic differences, too, between people. And it's partly that. It's partly biographical, what you grew up with and the experiences you had as you're growing up, and then just genetic sort of differences, being more or less timid and more or less eager
and we're
for
not,
those kinds of thrilling experiences.
We're not talking about people that are, go to the extremes of having to be on a bike and jumping. Video games are they are brought up in the documentary as well, and the amount of money people spend on video games. We didn't touch like horror movies or anything like that, but people buy to become put into that fear state. People pay for it. They pay for it in haunted houses, and there's great research going on in the video gaming market and how the scariest video games are really the ones that these developers are looking for.
Yeah, video games are almost overtaking, the video game industry, I think, has overtaken the film industry, but in terms of profits and so on. But incredibly popular, sort of survival horror is the genre. And it was the whole issue of, for us, we understand why people want to deal with their fears, why they want to get away from fears, cure their phobias. But then at the same time, we have, as human beings, we're a weird species. We have clearly this drive towards scary experiences, right? So what would drive people to spend all that money in a video game that's going to freak you out as you're playing it, right? Or scary movies where you're in the theater or at home and you're watching it and you're thinking, why am I watching this? I am scared out of my wits right now. But then you keep watching it and you watch the next one too.
Yeah,
so we have a sociologist who's Margee Kerr who studies this phenomenon in haunted houses. And we also have Teresa Lynch at Ohio State who uses video games and horror video games to study fear and fear responses, because it allows her much more data than it's much easier to wire somebody up and to study their responses as they're playing a video game than it is to try to get people to talk about their experiences after watching a scary movie, for example. It's much more real, and plus in a video game you are the agent, right? In a movie you're watching the person and you're sort of thinking in your head, no, don't open that door, what are you doing, don't go up there, what are you doing? But in the video game it's you, right? You have to go up the stairs, open that door. You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you don't, then the game nothing happens. So you have much more agency, so it's more interesting for them to study that thing. Well, but we thought, it was an interesting question to see why do we willingly put ourselves in these situations?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if the answer was ever given, because there's just so many various reasons why people would do it. And again, we're not talking about the stunt people, we're talking about everyday people who want to be afraid. And the interesting thing is that comes out, especially within the amount of money, I guess, people paid to develop great products, great haunted houses and everything. And it's not just our visual, is it? I mean, probably the greatest scare, and this came out in the documentary, is where the fear is sort of touching on all of our senses, our sight, our smells. So in the haunted house, smells can evoke fear. That to me was very, very interesting. We can have fear from many different sensual experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And the haunted house was a great opportunity for us to look at all that, because a good haunted house will touch on all those things, right? The visuals, of course, even the tactile. You're walking through a dark corridor and you feel something closing, pushing you from the sides. You don't know what it is. In fact, it's these two giant sort of balloons or bladders squeezing, so you start to feel claustrophobic, or something kind of, maybe sticky on your skin. You don't know what it is. It's dark. You just feel this, and also sounds and smells and all that stuff. So for sure, the fears can work at all those levels, and they should, to keep the person, freaked out enough.
Now, I guess
for the whole experience.
When we're walking through a haunted house, it's more of a fright as opposed to a fear. Is that played upon at all? Like, because we're not afraid maybe of putting our hands in goo when we can see it, but we're when we're going through and it's dark. These are scares more than fears. Is that correct, or does it all feed into the same mechanism?
Yeah, it's all the same kind of mechanism in the end. I mean, you can get spooked and you can get scared. Somebody can jump out at you and go, right? There's that scare response, a jump scare. But it's all kind of the same. It's all part of your brain, your body saying, be careful. This is weird, perhaps dangerous. What's going on? I don't know what's going on. And so I think often in a good haunted house or in a good suspense movie and so on, they just try to keep you in that state where you don't actually know that you don't actually see the monster that's going to come and attack you, but you always have this sense that maybe, is there something there? Is there something that's going to jump out at me? And if it is, where is it going to come from? So it keeps you in that heightened sense of sort of anxiety, of suspense somehow. Always guessing, and your brain is really just looking, scanning what's dangerous, something's dangerous, and that's the thrill.
And interesting that came out of that more women than men go seek out these thrills?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge statistical difference. It's about 55 to 45%, according to Margie's, data. But she also sort of said that she thinks it might just be because it looks like women are the ones who tend to organize social events more than men. Yeah. So, it looks like men and women both like going to haunted houses, but it may be that the women are the ones who actually organize the outing. And so it could be that's why there's more, 55% more women. There's
a lot more to read into the statistic is what you're saying.
Yeah, or that it's not... it's not significantly, if it was 70-30, then I think you could say, wow, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. More women like haunted houses than men. But at a level of 55-45, it's not statistically significant, really. But it seems to be regularly a little bit more women.
Women like the fear as much as the men. We put it on that even plateau. It's
for sure, absolutely.
Probably going in, it would be, most people would think it would be completely the other way, that men go and seek out the fears. But you know what? Women like the fear as much. Now, the show is already out on the CBC. It came out It came out beginning of November. Was that correct?
Yeah, it aired on the 2nd of November, and it's been available on the streaming service gem.cbc.ca since middle of October, I think, just before Halloween.
So people can go there to watch it. And if people are interested in finding out more about you, do you have social media sites that you'd like to share?
I don't, really. I have this film was produced by 90th Parallel, and that's the production company, so there's info there. But really, the Nature of Things website, CBC Nature of Things, has sort of additional articles on some of the stuff in the show and some of the people in the show. So that's a good resource, I think.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was a real pleasure to have you on the show. It's a really great documentary. It's hard to believe you can get something like that done in such a short period of time, but I really did enjoy it.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me, for sure.
My pleasure, and everybody will talk to you next week on The Health Hub.
You have been listening to The Health Hub, hosted by Kathy Biasi, here on Radio Maria Canada.